Thank you very, very much for having me here. Can you hear me? Is my mic working? Okay. And thank you for a really beautiful and really useful intro, Georgie. I've actually shared my story quite a few times now, in all honesty, full disclosure. I have become quite good at sharing my story, which is a good thing that I'm really, really proud of. But what I found is recently I have a new anxiety rising in that my story might become a bit over-rehearsed. And I never want it to feel like that. I want it always to feel human and useful to someone in the audience. And that is the reason that I get up in front of you. If there is one person that finds my sharing of my story useful, then job done. I might have a seat. So exactly 2 years ago, at the beginning of December, I did have a great big burnout moment. I burnt out physically and I burnt out mentally, and it felt pretty violent. I'll just pop in one of my reflections here at exactly the wrong moment, because it's on a card for the second half of this talk. It's not a competition about whose mental health story is more dramatic, traumatic, relevant, irrelevant. I think that's important to say. I made a little note about that because I was sitting there thinking that mine maybe wasn't as important, and so I had to have that word with myself. It is, Lisa, about that spectrum. Absolutely. And it's about our vulnerability. And it's about what's going on for us at any one moment in life. And who knows? Who knows what that was last year, 2 years ago? Who knows what it will be in 1 year from today? So we have to look after ourselves. And we are all part of this conversation. So in 2016, it was just one of those years. I had been leading my business for 15 years. I led the business in that year through a social investment deal. I had loads of physical health issues that I hadn't had sort of the full solutions and answers for. I developed a permanent headache, which I fondly called investment headache. I developed tinnitus. I had a lot of people issues because the business was going through a £1.5 million social investment round, and we were changing shape and size. My daughter was at secondary school. She was loving it. She joined every single extracurricular activity that she could. So the juggling of plates was just kind of even more in that year. My husband's career was taking off. He was out of the country more. Yeah, it was just one of those years. But on I think it was the 1st of December, I was packing my house up because, oh yeah, that was another thing that we were doing, having some renovations done. And I hit a wall and I sat at the bottom of my stairs and I just couldn't go on anymore, physically and mentally. I was amazed to call my GP and be able to get there within 15 minutes. You know, the NHS system is truly amazing. If it doesn't work for you the first time, please persevere to find the right thing for you. And my GP was brilliant, and I took space and I started a conversation with the really beautiful people that make up my board in Livity. But what I noticed was it was easier to talk about my fibroid, my really heavy periods, my impending loss of fertility because I was going to have a hysterectomy. It was easier to talk about all of those things than it was my mental health, which I had also flagged actually slightly earlier than the physical stuff. It was a bit of a tumbleweed moment when I said I'm worried for my mental health. And there was actually, you could feel the collective sigh of relief when I said, oh, and I've got some physical issues as well. Well, we knew there must be something wrong, Michelle. And I do hold myself complicit in putting a lid on that conversation because it was easier for me to talk about my heavy periods and hysterectomy. And look, let's face it, no one wants to talk about heavy periods around the boardroom table. So that shows us how much the stigma really is there. What followed next was me creating some space to get better and to think, and a number of conversations, obviously, had kick-started. And what happened next was I fell into a period of high anxiety. Insomnia played a huge part in that for me. It fueled a paranoia in me. And then I dropped into a period of depression, and I kind of ping-ponged between anxiety and depression. But I didn't know that's what it was. I didn't have a name for it. But I'm a pretty resilient person. I was going to see my GP. We weren't talking very much about my mental health at this stage. And as a resilient person, I had bought Ruby Wax's book, Frazzled, which some of you, I'm sure, will know about, and let me try and fix myself with some mindfulness. And there was a really important that's me moment when I was reading Ruby's description of falling back into depression while she's writing that book, Frazzled, with tears rolling down my face. And I thought, well, hold on a minute. What she's describing is how I feel, but she's calling it depression. And that was the moment that got me back to my GP. And it was me in front of my GP saying, I think I might have depression. And my GP was great. I mean, she kind of knew where we were, but she was supporting me to get to that place. And we started talking about medication. And yeah, I feel very grateful at that moment. I took the leaflets. I had a very clear sense that although I felt pretty worthless and helpless and hopeless, and I hated myself at that moment in time, I truly hated myself. I hated what was happening to me. I felt in absolute no control of it, but I did have a sense of hope. And so I said, well, actually, before I take medication, I would like to try NHS talking therapies. And so that was the beginning of my road to recovery and treatment. I have to admit, my experience of NHS therapies was not a great experience for me, but it was the beginning of finding the right thing for me. So I'm forever grateful. And because I am privileged, I had other options. Sorry, there's so much. Lisa's talk, I was like, yes, that, yeah, me. And one of the things that I did as part of my recovery and my treatment was I had taken time out of the business by this time, and I gave myself permission to play with the idea, if I did it all over again, what would I do? Because I guess the other important thing that I haven't shared is at that moment of burnout, just before the moment of high anxiety really kicked in, I had a horrible moment where I realised my purpose and passion for the business that I loved dearly, that I had put everything into. Sorry, it catches you sometimes, doesn't it? I'm okay. This happens sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't. It's weird, isn't it? You see, when you know you're with friends. And that purpose and passion had burnt out as well. And that's what triggered the anxiety and depression. And so I was on this journey by now, and actually I kind of knew in my heart of hearts I was going to have to step out in some shape or form of Livity, certainly the day-to-day leadership of it. And one of the things that I did, one of the things that I knew was, sure as hell I'm going to go and get a job. Someone had said to me, don't worry, Michelle, maybe you need to do something different from Livity. Maybe it's time to do something different, move on. Don't worry, you'll easily get another job. And I thought, I haven't had a job for the last 15 years, mate. And actually that was a big part of triggering that sort of very big, scary period of anxiety. But one of the things that I did was give myself permission to play with the idea, if I did it all over again, what would I do? And I thought, well, that's really easy. I would start another purpose-led business, which obviously sounds like madness when you're there in the space of the other one just having burnt you out. But I played with that idea. I'm one of the poster kids for purpose-led businesses, and it's what I believe in. It's what gives me so much of my good energy. It's also what gives me my bad energy as well, and I'm working on getting better at that. And so, well, I'd start another purpose-led business. Second rule of business, do something you love, do something you're passionate about. There was a little bit of a problem at this stage because I wasn't passionate about anything because I had depression. So I'd hit a wall and I'd wail to my husband, Remy, I'm not passionate about anything, Rem, apart from sitting in my beautiful pyjamas that you bought me for Christmas. And he and Lily, my daughter, had bought me some gorgeous pyjamas from Liberties. And really on those days where I felt like I couldn't get out of the front door and was in the fetal position on my settee, I would put my Liberty pyjamas on and think, well, at least if someone knocks at the door, I look fabulous. And so I stayed in this space and I stayed in my pyjamas for some time until one day I kind of describe it as getting to the crossroads of where brilliance meets madness, where the pyjamas that represented everything holding me back became my inspiration. And I wondered, were there other people who could see the duality of the PJ day? The good ones where we choose to stay in our pyjamas, we're resting, relaxing, they're joyful, we should have more of those. But for some of us, there are those days where you can't get out of your pyjamas, you can't get out the front door, maybe you can't get out from underneath your duvet. And could we make the most kind and caring pyjamas? Fashion is a big issue for people and planet, so I wanted the whole supply chain to be absolutely packed with purpose. But could the pyjamas that were going to be designed by artists, because art had been an important part of my own treatment and recovery, could they be the Trojan horse for delivering messages of hope and help? And could that mission be to make mental health an everyday conversation? Because there was one moment before I stepped out of the business and we were trying to work out what I would say to the business. And it was a mistake by someone. I think it was driven by fear. You know, there's no bad vibes, but someone did say to me, you know, Mish, it's a bit awkward when you talk about your mental health. And that was such a crushing moment, and I went silent, and the people in my business didn't know why I had gone missing. And what I have found, as I said, I have shared my story really quite a lot of times now with individuals, with small groups, with large groups. It's awkward for about 3 seconds, that little bit in our head where am I going to tell someone about my depression or burnout, or I'm going to ask someone, are you okay? You know, even that moment where, and I've become a mental health first aider, I have asked people directly, can I ask you, are you having suicidal thoughts? I'd rather go through that awkwardness and be that human being that feels kind of brave enough to have a conversation. It's not really that awkward. And so me and my best friend who sat at the back, Susie Moore, have started up PJoys as this experiment. But 11 days ago, we closed our crowdfunder campaign, £5,000 over our target. But the joyful thing, and I haven't got enough time to read them all out to you, but the pyjamas are conversation starters. Well, they kind of are, aren't they? Why are you wearing your pyjamas on the tube? Why are you wearing your pyjamas in the school playground? Yeah, we have had so many joyful, passionate, powerful, fragile, vulnerable conversations around mental health. And I know that these things, this business that we're going to pack full of purpose, can play one small part in this great big narrative that is absolutely in its early days. How long have I got? So a few things that I thought I would share, kind of sort of at a poignant 2 years on from that moment. It has taken me 2 years to recover. Yeah, and here I am, still a bit weepy sometimes. I have no regrets about what has happened to me because I'm here with all of you, amazing people, having this conversation, starting a new business, getting so much energy from that. You know, finding a new purpose, finding a new passion. And my other business is now being led by someone who feels really, really purposeful and passionate about it. That's like a win-win, isn't it? That's amazing. Recovery is the message. Recovery is the most likely outcome. Recovery looks different for different people. You will be most likely a different person when you go into that place of recovery. The language, I absolutely agree that with John, you know, we mustn't be too afraid of the language that we're using and finding out with this topic, because I think it can be quite frightening sometimes to think that I might use the wrong language. So you kind of have to beg for forgiveness and just pledge to keep on learning and evolving in terms of that whole narrative. And for me, you know, this is my story. I had a conversation with someone this morning, and I confess, you know, I'm a bit sick of my story. I said, you know, because I've shared it a lot, and I had that worry. But actually, I'm going into the next bit of my story now, and so I'm working on that over the next few weeks to see how, you know, I can tell one bit maybe a little bit quicker because it's still relevant. But I'm really excited about the next bit of my story and how, you know, I might come back here one day in the future and share that bit. I really am working hard on how I build all the tools and tips and techniques into my daily life. It was very interesting running the crowdfunder. Lots of bad habits and behaviours came back. Oh, I was loving it. Let's work really hard. Let's just do another email. You know, and I started to get tired and ratty, and I stopped using my coping mechanism, you know, all those good things that I do to nurture myself. And up until that point, I had this really lovely mantra of slowly but joyfully, and I'm absolutely convinced that that's why we had such a strong crowdfunder campaign and such a strong start to the beginning of the business was actually going a bit more slowly is a good thing. And I guess sort of final thoughts is, because I have had so many conversations about my mental health, I absolutely believe this is rooted in business benefits. So going back to the leadership point, yeah, probably more than should, but most of my conversations usually start with the mental health bit now. But what I find is you've got 30 minutes with someone, we talk about mental health for 20 minutes, because I'll share my story, and 9 times out of 10, someone will share their story back. And in the last 5 minutes, we do the business. And we do the business because we've actually established trust and understanding and a more deeper, meaningful relationship with one another than all those coffees and drinks and, you know, that you might otherwise do in business to, you know, in 3 years feel like you actually have got to know someone. So I absolutely, you know, if you want to get the commercial business case for why mental health, aside from just the human being case. And that 1 in 4, 3 in 4, whether we believe the stats or what they mean to us or not, you know, the bit that I'm also quite interested in now is you know, the people that are slightly on the brink. I bet if I said, you know, just using burnout as the question, if you felt comfortable, and please don't put your hand up if you don't, but has anyone experienced burnout, breakdown of a kind in here? Could you put your hand up? Okay, well, we're at Minds at Work, so there's a lot of you. There's a lot of you out. But can you also put your hand up if you feel comfortable, if you have ever felt on the brink, maybe? And I'm really interested in that part of the conversation as well. But again, it comes back to the spectrum. That's probably my 20 minutes up. I'm happy to answer any questions. If anything that I have shared tonight, I'm also a mental health first aider. So please don't hesitate to have a chat if anything has affected you at all.
Thank you.